Okay, lesson 7.2, factoring using the greatest common factor. Do you remember yesterday? Yesterday, we learned how to find the greatest common factor. So today, we're going to factor using that process. Okay, let's talk about the distributive property. If you can recall the distributive property, you see we have a product, and when we distribute A times B, we get AB plus A times C gives me AC. Well, you can work backwards on that as well. Let's kind of ignore this part right here. And let's look at AB plus AC. What can I factor out of each term? I can see that I can factor out an A. So I'm going to factor out an A. Everything else is going to go inside parentheses. Okay? So since I factored out an A, what's that leave me with? That leaves me with B plus C. Okay? To check my factorization, does A times B give me AB? Yes. Does A times C give me AC? Yes. So this is factored. Okay? A polynomial is factored when it meets these two conditions. Number one, it is written as a product. Here I can see I have a product because I have multiplication. It's a product, and the monomials and polynomials cannot be factored any further. I cannot factor anything else out of here. So this is factored completely. For example, it wants to know, is 2 times 3x minus 4x factored? Well, is it a product? Yes, it's a product. But can anything else be factored out? Yes, I can see that I can factor out an x right here. So no, this is not completely factored. It's not completely factored. And again, this is chapter 7, lesson 2 on your iPad app, if you're following along. Pull mine up right quick. Okay, example 1, we're going to learn how to factor each polynomial. Okay, I'm going to look at each term. I have 2 terms. Can I factor anything out of each term? Yes. I can factor out an x. Okay? And then everything else is going to go inside parentheses. Okay? I factored out an x, so I'm going to mark it out. Here I have x times x. I factored out an x, so that's just going to leave me with 1x. Okay? So I'm going to have 4x minus 3. This is now factored completely. Look at B. Look at your numbers first. Can I factor anything out of 10, 20, and negative 5? Yes, I can factor out a 5. I'm going to write it down. If you want to, 5 will go into 10 2 times. 5 will go into 20 4 times. 5 will go into 5 1 time. Okay. Everything else is going to go inside parentheses. Can I factor out a variable? Here I have y times y times y, y times y, y. I can see I can factor out at least a y, so I have 5y. Okay? So that's going to leave me with 2. I factored out 1y, so that's going to leave me with y squared plus 4, because 5 will go to 24 times. I factored out a y, so that's going to leave me with just y minus 5 will go into 5 1 time. I already factored out that y, so it's just minus 1. We are now factored completely because we have a product and we cannot factor anything else out. Let's look at C. Whenever when I'm trying to factor, whenever I'm leading with a negative number, I always want to factor out a negative 1, okay? So I'm going to factor out a negative 1, and what that's going to do is a negative divided by negative makes a positive, so I'm going to have 12x. Negative divided by negative makes a positive, so I'm going to have plus 8x squared. Okay, I'm going to bring down this negative 1 that I factored out, and now I'm going to factor everything inside these parentheses. I can see that I can factor at least a 4 out, so I'm going to have 4. Okay. I also can factor out an x. I'm going to have 4x. Everything else goes inside parentheses. 4x will go into 12x 3 times. 4x will go into 8x 2x. Alright. So don't forget about this negative 1 that we factored out. Negative 1 times 4x gives me negative 4x, 3 plus 2 times x. We are now factored completely. And if you look on your example in your app, on letter C, you can see where they factored out this negative 1, and then they just brought it all the way down as they continue to factor. Okay. Example 2 on the science application. Actually, let me do a checkpoint from example 1 before we go on. Let's do 1D. This is on the checkpoint. I have 8x to the 4th plus 4x cubed minus 2x squared. I'm looking, can I factor any numbers out? Yes, I can factor out a 2. Can I factor any letters out? Yes, I can factor out at least an x squared. Then everything else is going to go inside parentheses. 2x squared will go into 8x squared. 2 will go into 8, 4. You took out x squared, so that's going to leave me with x squared. And then 2 will go into 4 plus 2 times. You factored out an x squared, so that's going to leave me with an x. And then 2 will go into negative 2, negative 1 times. You've already factored out the x squared, so this is now factored completely. Alright, now going on to the example 2 science application. It says Mandy's calculator is powered by solar energy. The area of the solar panel is 7x squared plus x.
Let me have your attention, please. Due to the TP Hut being closed, there's no reason for kids to be outside during lunch today. So please stay inside the building. There are no Frank Phillips classes today. Also, the high school kids being released from the afternoon gym classes and stuff that are coming back through the elementary to get to the buses. Please go get on the bus and do not go through the elementary school. Please don't let your name be turned in to me for being in the elementary school when you should be on the bus. It will be some detention time.
Okay, so we know the area of a solar panel, which is in the shape of a rectangle, is 7x squared plus x. How do we find the area of a rectangle? Length times width. Okay, so I know that the length times the width equals 7x squared plus x. It wants us to factor this out to find possible dimensions for the length and the width. So, to factor this out, I know that I can factor out an x. So that's going to leave me with 7x plus 1. Okay, here would be your dimensions. Here we could have length and width. We could say our width is x. We could say our length is 7x plus 1. Okay, so possible dimensions would be x centimeters and 7x plus 1 centimeters. Alright, example 3. factor out a common binomial. Well, let's look at A. I have 7 times x minus 3 minus 2x times x minus 3. I can see that we have an x minus 3 in common. That's a common binomial in each term. So I'm going to factor out the x minus 3. Everything else goes in parentheses. I'll mark out the binomial after I factor it out. That way I can easily see that I'm left with 7 minus 2x. B. I can see that I have a t squared plus 4 in common. Everything else will go inside parentheses. Factored out, so I'm going to put a plus 1. Okay? So that's going to leave me with negative t plus 1. Now let's look at D. I don't have a common binomial. I can't factor anything else out because there's nothing else in common. So this cannot be factored. On your check it out, I'm going to do 3b. Okay, we have 7x times 2x plus 3 plus 2x plus 3. I can see I have a common binomial, so I'm going to factor that common binomial out. Everything else goes in parentheses. So I'd have 7x plus 1. Okay. Up to this point, we've just been factoring polynomials that have 2 or 3 terms. Okay. Example 4, I can see that I have 4 terms. When you have 4 terms, you want to use grouping. In grouping, we represent with parentheses. So when you factor by grouping, let's put these first 2 terms in parentheses, second 2 terms in parentheses, and then let's factor from there. In this first group, I can see that I can factor out at least a 3 and a squared. 3a squared will go into 12a cubed, 3 will go into 12/4. I factored out a squared, so that leaves me with a minus 3 will go into 9 3 times. I already factored out the a squared. Drop down my plus. Second group, I can factor out a 5. And I can't factor out any letters. So 5 will go into 20, 4a, minus 5 into 15, 3. Now I can see I have a common binomial, so I'll factor it out. Everything else inside parentheses. So that leaves me with 3a squared plus 5. Pretty much the same thing on B. I have 4 terms, so I'm going to use grouping. First group, I can factor out a 9x squared. 9 will go into 9 once. X squared will go into x cubed, x. Bring down my plus. 9 will go into 18 twice. We already factored out the x squared. Moving on, I'm going to drop down my plus. I have a common binomial, so I'm going to factor it out. Everything else goes inside parentheses. So I have 9x squared plus 1. Okay. Example 5, factor with opposites. Okay, we still have 4 terms, so we're going to use grouping. Okay, so in this first set of parentheses, I can see that I can factor out a 3x squared. 3 will go into 3 once. X squared will go into x cubed, leaving an x. Minus 3x squared will go into 15x squared. 3 will go into 15, 5. We already factored out the x squared. Drop down our plus. Factor out of here, I can factor out a 2. So that's going to leave me with 5 minus x. Okay, do I have a common binomial? No. Because here the x is positive, here the x is negative. Here x is negative 5, here x is 5 is positive. Okay? So those are opposites. But if I divide out a negative 1, if I factor out a negative 1, I can change this sign. I can even factor out a negative 1 over here and change this sign. It doesn't matter. It's just going to be easier to factor out a negative 1 and then change my sign to negative and positive. Okay, so to make this look a little more simpler, I'm going to have 3x squared times x minus 5 plus 2 times negative 1 is negative 2 times, and then I have x minus 5. Okay. Now I can see I have a common binomial, so I'm just going to factor it out. Everything else goes in parentheses, so I'm going to have 3x squared minus 2. And your assignment, these numbers didn't print off very clearly. Your assignment looks like number 28, 30, 36, 38, 42, 44, 50, 54, 56, 58, 60, 62, 64, and 68. And that's your assignment for this lesson.